Hello there. How's it going, guys? Today we're going to be talking to you about the assassin node for Galemas, aka NA's 2021 Christmas. So this node, guys, to begin with here, is going to be sort of an all node. It's going to be our day one node, our first real farmable node. And this is important because you'll literally get all the materials for the shop in this node if you so choose. There are going to be nodes after this for each respective day that give some materials for predominantly one mat in the shop, say the gold or the silver or something like that, and they'll also give another one. But this can certainly be a node that probably a majority of people will actually finish the shop on. Now, it is worth noting that there are some day zero nodes that will kind of last until the first reset of the first day. Those nodes are going to be used primarily for farming out your shop CEs. That way you guys get that Lotto CE that's really going to help you in the drops. But otherwise, you guys don't have to waste all that time, maybe like you did in any of the fest events during the fall there, where, you know, again, you had to go farm an actual currency node rather than the Lotto node that you wanted to be farming. Instead, in this one, all the nodes will give both Lotto currency and shop currency, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Instead, the structure is just going to be sort of go for each day with the best node you possibly can. As long as you start out getting those shop CEs on day zero, you should be fine. You don't have to waste too much time there, especially if you don't have robust plans for your box count. However, I am going to mention here, guys, that remember, as always, the Christmas Lotto is one that tends to have to last you a long time. Normally we end up with a Lotto sometime around September. That only has to last you until this Christmas Lotto. But the Christmas Lotto has to last you until the September Lotto next year, which is going to be Show Fest. So sometimes it's worth actually going a little bit harder during the Christmas Lottos. Try and stockpile and hoard some more of the embers and QP and mana prisms and skill gems, stuff that you might need for the future to level up your units. So this is a good consideration, even if maybe you don't need the ascension mats in this one as bad. So just keep that in mind as we go through, but otherwise let's jump right in. So starting off with the node here, guys, you guys can see, again, this is going to be a 333 assassin node. Thankfully, as the first node, we're not going to be dealing too much with health values that are going to be super inflated or anything that's too hard to deal with. Remember, guys, there is damage bonus in this event as well, so you guys can utilize that pretty effectively with certain units. One of those units is Chen Gong. You guys are going to see a nice comp for him in this. Again, this is something that I think we can expect going forward, that the damage dealers that have damage bonus are going to be sort of one of the easier solutions to a lot of this. But otherwise, with a 333 assassin node makeup, you guys know the easy solution to a lot of this is going to be your caster. So don't expect a lot of quick comps in this node, and that's surprising, again, just because this is a Lotto that has a quick CE as the lottery CE. It's a very good CE, Traces of Christmas. It's all attack scaling, gives quick up and NP gain up. But so that will at least help facilitate, even on your arts loopers here, a little bit of refund. But because of the fact that this is basically our day one node, our first day node, sort of that's going to be the farm for us, we are going to be kind of trying to build a lot of the comps around just a normal Lotto drop CE, not an MLB. We understand that that's going to be a huge problem. This CE does have starting charge on it. So at non-MLB, we're going to be working with 30%. At MLB, we're going to be working with 50%. So we felt like, yeah, sure, MLB makes it a lot easier for you guys, but it's not always going to be something that everyone's going to have, especially if they don't go hard out of the gate. So you guys will get 4 copies of that from the shop. You will have to farm for a 5th copy. And that's why we can't guarantee you guys will have MLB on the first day, because you're going to need several drops if you're trying to take the most Lotto CEs that you possibly can. The good news is, though, again, if you guys farm this event fairly hard, especially on this node, you will auto clear the shop. You won't have to worry about that. So that's going to be a nice thing. The key is, again, just going to be to try and start out day one here by having already had the CEs out of the shop, those 4 copies that we were talking about from those day zero nodes. So again, otherwise, the only big concern that I'd like to bring up here is going to be Stheno. Shouldn't be too much of a concern for our arts units here, but if you guys were happening to use like a quick unit with Scotty or anyone else who's debuff oriented, like say Arjuna Alter, be careful of Stheno. Stheno has a 50% increase to debuff resistance. She's one of the most resistant units in the entire game. Thankfully, this is early in the Lotto and she only has 92k HP. So if you guys have a strong unit, you might still be able to just overpower her even if she resists your debuffs. But be careful with that. You don't necessarily want to end up in a scenario where you're super reliant on those and she just sits there constantly resisting you over and over and over again, attempt after attempt. So that's the only other big point I'm going to make about the overall makeup of the assassin node here. So precisely in line with what I was talking about earlier, you guys can see we're actually going to have a very simple solution for this first node, and it's going to be using an NP1 Anastasia with no MLB drop CEs here. But the good news is this Anastasia can be also replaced with an NP1 DaVinci, and you can replace the Paracelsus here in wave 2 with an NP1 Nitocris if you wanted to use her to handle the middle wave. Keep in mind, if you use Nitocris, you're not getting the buffs that Paracelsus brings with his latter two skills, so that might not help out your damage dealer in the third wave as much, and your damage numbers will not be as good. So just keep that in mind. But otherwise, we're going to be using a Rash here to handle the first wave, and because of this, we're going to get a party rotation, so he's going to be able to allow us to take a support waiver. Or if you manage to have your own waiver, you could take a support Nito, maybe in place of Para, or, you know, another stronger caster in place of Anastasia, someone that is able to nuke here. So this comp is very malleable. It's very able to be sort of picked apart and twisted around as long as it works. It's the structure overall that we're after. So we're actually able to use 2004 Fragment 2004's Mystic Code here, which again is going to give us some very nice NP damage buff on the final wave. We're not actually going to be using the refund off of this though, because it's just such a, like, each unit is handling one wave, so we don't care about refund. But again, this is going to be 6 CE, so it's going to make it real nice. Looking at the overall performance of the comp, the only things we're worried about here is the Soul Eater in wave 2 living with about 9k. It should be pretty easy with the casters all being effective in this node since we're going up against assassins. And then Stheno in the final wave living, just keep in mind what I was saying earlier in the node structure notes about Stheno being able to resist. You should be fine though, because everything in this comp should be pretty buff oriented, though Anastasia does have some debuffs into her kit. So for party composition here, you guys want to start out with a front line of a Rash, Waiver, and Anastasia with Paracelsus on the back line. And then in turn 1 here, you're going to start out by using all your Waiver skills on a Rash. You're going to go ahead and use a Rash's skill 3. Again, that should be enough to charge him to full. Go ahead and have him in P, easily handle that first wave, and then rotate Paracelsus in. On turn 2 here, go ahead and activate Paracelsus's first and second skills, and then go ahead and use Anna's second skill as well to get Paracelsus the damage that he's going to need. Have him in P and just watch out for that Soul Eater there in turn 2. Now here in turn 3, go ahead and utilize Anna's first and third skill. Go ahead and use the NP damage up from the Mystic Code on Anastasia, and then fire off Anastasia's NP, and she should easily handle everything with only Stheno living about 30% of the time. Okay, so next up we've got a 6 CE Plugsuit comp that's going to be utilizing a Rash, Paracelsus, and Chen Gong. You guys have seen probably in the Universal video that we have some Chen Gong comps, but this one's going to be using Chen Gong primarily as a nuker, and that is because of his damage bonus in the event. We're also able to get away with non-MLB CEs here, so this is really easy and efficient. The good news is here too, we are using staggered supports, so we don't require you to have either one of these. As long as you have one of the two, you can take the other. So that is a very nice thing. Again, you guys can certainly use double waiver if you so choose. You can't use double Scotty. We do have to have one waiver in this comp. But otherwise, there's no skill requirements on Paracelsus and no skill requirements on Chen Gong, with the only thing being a Rash having a skill requirement of 10 on his third skill. But you could also have no requirement on a Rash skill and instead just raise Paracelsus's first skill to compensate, so that you guys have enough charge when it comes to the later waves. But yes, this is how this one's going to work. It's not too bad. Just keep in mind, if you go for this strategy, Para will probably struggle to kill the Soul Eater in wave 2, because we've structured this comp in such a way that sort of the normal deficiencies of this node will not come into play. A lot of buffs are going to get popped here in wave 2 to help Paracelsus out in the damage department, and that is also going to allow us to avoid Stheno's debuff resistance potentially if you're using Scotty. So Again, we should be really nice for this comp and its affordability. All right, so for our party composition, we're going to start out with Arash, Waver, Chen, Gong on the front line, and then on the back line, Paracelsus and Scotty. The order here does matter, as we are going to be utilizing Arash's party rotation when he dies, as well as the Plugsuit, so you don't want to screw this one up. Now, for our turn order here, in turn 1, we're going to use Arash's skill 3, and then Waver's skill 1 and 2. That's the defense up on Arash. And then go ahead and use Arash's NP at this point. He will easily kill wave 1 and rotate Paracelsus in. On turn 2 here, we're going to have a lot of buffs, so pay close attention. We're going to be doing Paracelsus's first and second skills. We're going to be utilizing Waver's skill 3, and then we're going to go ahead and do Chen Gong's skill 2. At that point, go ahead and Plugsuit Waver for the Scotty in the back line, and go ahead and have her pop her skill 2, and then have her use her skill 3 on Chen Gong. Here, now, go ahead and use the Plugsuit attack buff, and then you can finally NP with Para. You should handle the wave pretty cleanly. It should be an easy kill. For turn 3 now, you have nothing left to do. Chen Gong is fully charged, just NP. Stheno will barely live some of the time, so just watch out and make sure you have a card, I guess, but you can't not, so. All right, so next up, guys, we have the PaNDa comp. This is going to be the Paracelsus, Nitocris, DaVinci Caster comp. We are 6 CE here with no MLB. We are Chaldea Mystic Code, which is the OG Mystic Code in the game. We are assuming rank 10 of it for damage purposes. We tried to make this as easy as possible on you guys. You guys can certainly utilize something like your Summer 3 Mystic Code or Arctic Mystic Code if you guys have them for a little bit more damage. So it's just up to you in that regard. Again, here, looking at the overall comp, we don't require anything on Paracelsus's third skill because we're not using Refund. So we don't care about that. Each one of these units is just taking out the respective wave. We are only requiring an NP1 Nitocris. Again, the first skill here is more or less a guideline. You do not have to have it or use it. It's just she'll be NPing the second wave here where the Soul Eater will sometimes live. If you really were hard up for some reason, you can maybe try to make that work by popping the death skill there, but it is absolutely non-essential, and I won't even talk about it in the turn order. And then DaVinci here is the actual big barrier to entries. We'll be requiring an NP2 DaVinci, but a special note about this, we are assuming skill 1 fails, so that is why we're requiring an NP2. If the first skill doesn't fail, this is going to be a lot easier. So if you guys have a more robust DaVinci, you guys could certainly try to make something work here if you had it like Grailed or Gold Foed, but only NP1. Again, that's not going to offset NP2, but just remember this is assuming failure of the first skill's NP damage proc. You guys can always, try to compensate, or again, use another better Mystic Code in that regard. So this is built for failure, and you guys can always try to stretch it a little bit more if you have something better. Remember too, the drop CE is in and of itself a fully attack scaling CE. So if you manage to have MLB, you guys could certainly level that up all the way to 100 even. It is a good CE even outside of the event. So I will leave that one up to you if you want to do that. But it's another option for trying to stretch this if you're lucky enough here on day 1 to already have MLB. But yes, this should be a relatively quick and easy comp. There is no rotation, so you guys don't have to worry about that. There's no plug suiting, arashing, or Chen Gonging. It's just very easy and straightforward. All right, now for party composition, it's relatively straightforward. We're going to be utilizing Paracelsus, Nitocris, and DaVinci. And then for turn order here in turn 1, we're going to be doing Paracelsus's first and second skills, DaVinci's second and third skill, and Nitocris's second skill. From that point, go ahead and NP with Para. And turn 2 here, Nitocris is already prepped, so go ahead and NP with her. If you have just an NP1, the Soul Eater might live sometimes. And then with DaVinci here in the final wave, you guys need to pop her first skill, and then the Chaldea Mystic Code attack buff and NP, and you should be good. It's worth noting that we did assume failure here, so you guys can always try to make something a little bit more work. Certainly you could shift her third skill to this turn if you needed the stars to help you card, so that's another thing, but we built the turn order in such a way that everything realistically gets popped turn 1, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Right, next up here, guys, we have a Kiara comp. Again, this one is going to be 6 CE, but you can drop it to 5 CE if you manage not to have an MLB. So we did assume no attack power in the calculations of this comp coming from a CE. This means that you guys can utilize literally anything, including Dragon's Meridian in here if you so chose. So there's a lot of other options here, but this is assuming an MLB CE already on day one or a replacement CE for that to start Kiara at the 50% charge. The good news is we're only going to be utilizing an NP1 Kiara. The bad news is we need Waver, Tamamo, and a Plugsuit, and as you guys know, sometimes Tamamo can be hard to find on support. So it's just up to you guys. If you have Tamamo, it'll be easy to find another Waver. If you have a Waver, you might need to find some friends that have a Tamamo to help you out. But otherwise, it's Plugsuit. And again, we're assuming rank 10 skills on that Kiara, just for both damage and refund purposes here, as she will be handling 2 of the waves. Only thing you guys got to watch out for here is Stheno in the final wave. Do remember Stheno is highly resistant to debuff, so keep that one in the back of your head. And then again, assuming everything goes according to plan, Stheno will live only about 31% of the time, with basically 6k at most remaining. Just be careful again with your debuffs on Stheno. So for our party composition here, I want you guys to start out with a front line of Paracelsus, Kiara, Tamamo, and Waver. Then for our turn order here in turn 1, I want you guys to go ahead and use Tamamo's first and third skills on Kiara. Then go ahead and Plugsuit her out for Waver. Now at this point, go ahead and use Waver's first and second and third skills all on Kiara. And then go ahead and use Paracelsus's skill 1, 2, and 3 with the third going on Kiara. At this point, NP with Paracelsus and you should be fine. In turn 2 here, go ahead and pop Kiara's third skill and then NP with Kiara again. Now in turn 3 here, be very careful because you guys are actually going to need to pop these skills in a certain order. Make sure you do Kiara's skill 1 before her skill 2 because it gives the debuff resist down to Stheno. And then go ahead and use the Plugsuit attack buff here as well. And then you guys should be good to NP. Just again, be careful. Stheno will live some of the time and watch out for debuffs getting resisted. Right now here, guys, we have an oldie but a goodie. For those of you guys that remember the Panini comp that got run a couple years back in some of the Lotto events, here is basically what we're calling the PiNaTa comp for this. This is the same structure as Panini was, where it's Paracelsus, Nitocris, and a second Nitocris. But now we're going to be using Tamamo and a Plugsuit, and it should work out because the only real requirement here is going to be on wave 3 for the damage output. So you guys can see the first Nitocris needs to be at NP1 only, but the second Nitocris needs to be at NP2. We're going to be using a rank 10 Plugsuit, so the damage buff here is going to matter a little bit. And you guys can see Stheno is going to have an 11k HP remaining, almost 12k HP remaining, sort of worst case scenario. So the problem here would be potentially carding. If you have a better, stronger Nitocris, you could certainly maybe make it work, but I don't think straight Panini would work without the Tamamo buff unless you just had a super Nitocris of some sort, like NP5 Grailed Gold Fode. So again, we're looking at some sort of very quick comp here with the only slowdown being the Plugsuit really, but otherwise this should be a relatively approachable comp as long as you have your own Nitocris, because otherwise you can find another Nitocris for this comp, and I do think people will have her up because she is going to be very useful for this round. Alright, so for our party composition here, I want you guys to start out with a front line of Paracelsus and then the 2 Nitocris's, and then have Tamamo in the back line. Now in the turn order here, for turn 1, go ahead on Para and pop his first and second skill, and then fire off his NP right away, and he should easily handle wave 1. For turn 2 here, go ahead and Plugsuit out that Waver for the Tamamo, and then go ahead and use Tama's skill 1 and 3 on the stronger Nito, and then on the weaker Nito, go ahead and pop her charge skill and fire off her NP. Then turn 3 here, go ahead and use the stronger Nito skill 2 and then the Plugsuit attack buff, and you should be good to go ahead and NP. Just again, watch out for Stheno living a majority of the time if you only had an NP2 Nitocris at about 11 or 12k. Now for the next comp, guys, we have Sieg. Sieg is again a very good welfare, so for those of you guys lucky enough to have him and have invested in him, Again, you guys can see we're going to be requiring a 10, 9, 10 skill, but this is going to be a really easy 6 CE comp with no MLB requirements. So that is going to be the nice advantage of this. We're going to be using the fragment of 2004 at rank 10, and that is going to be required for refund in this scenario. So we will actually be looking at that. Otherwise, it's a relatively straightforward comp with only the waiver being the big requirement outside of Sieg, as Paracelsus is going to be used to handle the first wave. And you guys can see we are avoiding having to lure him, so that is definitely working in our favor. Again though, be careful here. We do want to watch out for Stheno. Remember guys, Stheno is highly debuff resistant, and Sieg does apply defense down before his NP. So watch out in that regard if we're ending up in turn 3. Remember you guys, if you are lucky enough to have an MLB CE, you can always level the CE to get a little bit more damage power out of it, or you could, for instance, substitute this CE for a more damage oriented CE if you didn't really have the drops necessary to fill out a full 6 CE requirement at this point. So it is really nice. Remember guys, that's something you guys can always do early in a Lotto, or if you've just recently managed to MLB one of the copies and you've stepped down in terms of the CEs that you're actually carrying. So you can work in a better CE to make the comp smoother in some cases, but this should be a very fast comp and very easy comp, as we're not going to be using Plugsuit, and it's just going to be sort of buff and go. Right now for the party composition, you guys are going to start out with the front line of Paracelsus, Sieg, and Waver. For turn 1 now, go ahead and utilize Paracelsus's first, second, and third skills, with the third one going on Sieg. Then go ahead and use Waver's third and first skill on Sieg, and then Sieg's first skill. From there, go ahead and NP with Para and have him handle wave 1, and you should be nicely set up for wave 2. So now in turn 2 here, go ahead and use Sieg's second and third skills to charge him to full and prepare his damage, and then go ahead and use the Fragment of 2004's NP gain skill on Sieg and go ahead and fire off that NP. At that point, Sieg should refund a little bit over 89%, should be good set up for turn 3 here. And then turn 3, just pop that second Waver skill, and then the Fragment of 2004's first skill, which is the NP damage up on Sieg, and fire off the last remaining NP, and you should be good. Again, just watch out for Stheno to resist that defense down from Sieg, with again about 11k remaining at max, but watch out again if that debuff occurs. Right here guys, we have our first buster comp of the node. This is going to be sort of the Anni 50% charger comp, but it is going to be nice in that regard. So as you guys can see, we're going to be utilizing Anni Blonde for this and Waver, and we should be able to get away with only an NP2 Nero Caster as a result. Now again, you guys might be able to substitute somebody else or something else in here. Just keep in mind that at that point you might need to switch up Anni Blonde, or again some other sort of aspect of this comp. But otherwise, a very straightforward system. You guys can see we're going to use a Rash in the first wave and Paracelsus in the second. Both of those are free to play units everybody should have. So then all we need is that Nero Caster here in the end, and she should be nicely set up for a nice 6 CE, no MLB sort of setup here. Again, thanks to the fact that we're only using one support, we can take whoever we need to in that regard, but it does need to be Waver. And again, you could certainly say if you had Waver, take somebody else's Nero Caster to make this work. Just make sure they at least have a drop CE on if you're going to do that. So it's also worth noting here that we can actually get away with a NP1 Nitocris in place of the Paracelsus if you don't have him leveled. He's not going to be helping anybody else's damage in this comp out unless you manage to switch this around to an arts comp somehow. But so that is an option for you guys. Now for our party composition here, I want you guys to start out with a front line of a Rash, and then Waver, and then Nero Caster with Paracelsus on the back line. So for turn 1 here, let's go ahead and use all the Waver skills on a Rash, then go ahead and use a Rash's skill 3 to charge himself to full and have him NP and rotate Paracelsus in. Now for turn 2, go ahead and use Paracelsus's first and second skill, and then just NP himself. Just be careful of the Soul Eater living a lot of the time with basically 10k max. And then for turn 3 here now, let's go ahead and use all of Nero Caster's skills on herself, and then go ahead and use the Mystic Code Buster up on her from Anni Blonde, and then have her fire off her NP and have her easily kill Stheno at NP2, since we're not relying on debuffs. Right now, Next up here for the last of our buster comps, you guys can see we have a Okitan comp, which is again going to be not too bad here at only requiring an NP1. I think the bigger problem with this comp is going to be the support requirements, as certainly you guys can take either a Waver or Scotty for that third support, but otherwise you have to have your own Waver and Scotty, so it doesn't give you a lot of flexibility if you don't have a robust support setup in Okitan. We are going to be using potentially 6 CE here, but it's going to require you to have an MLB CE already on this Arash, or you guys can use any 50% CE because we didn't calculate it with any sort of attack power, but that will be stepping down to a potential 5 CE comp at that point, so it's just up to you and what you guys want to do in that regard. But again, it should be relatively easy. You guys can always try to maybe flip the CEs around and do the skills in a different order, but we're going to present it to you in this way. The only thing you guys really got to watch out for again is going to be Stheno. And Stheno, remember, has high debuff resistance, but that shouldn't be too bad. Just keep that in mind if we end up using debuffs on her in turn 3. But otherwise, you guys can see half the time she'll die clean, the other half she will live with at most 9k remaining, so you're not too worried about having to card your way out of this one. It's also worth noting here, guys, that you could actually get away with a 30% charge CE on Arash, but that would require double Waver. So we wanted to keep the comp malleable, so we're going to present it to you with the 50% CE on Arash. It's just something I wanted to bring up in case you guys wanted to make this work. So for the party composition, I want you guys to start out with a front line of Arash, Okitan, and Waver. And then on the back line, make sure it's in this order, but have Scotty and then the other Waver. For turn 1 here now, we're going to start out by using all of the first Waver's skills on Okitan. There, go ahead and swap out that Waver for the other Waver in the back line. Go ahead and use that Waver's skill 2 and 3. From here, go ahead and charge Arash, and he should be full, so have him fire off the NP, and he should rotate Scotty in at that point. Now for turn 2 here, go ahead and use Okitan's skill 1, and just fire the NP off on her. And now in turn 3 here, we're going to go ahead and use the remaining Waver skill 1 on Okitan, and then we're going to use Okitan's second and third skills as well. Now go ahead and use Scotty's second skill, and then use the third skill on Okitan. Pop that Plugsuit attack up, and you're done. Go ahead and fire off the NP, and you should be fine. Again, just watch out for Stheno to live some of the time, but otherwise should be easy. Alright guys, thank you for watching. That's going to be it for our day 1 assassin node, our all node here. Again, the next video should be the berserker node. That one's going to be a little bit more open, and we're going to have a lot of comps be possible from the other videos that we've made. So just keep your eye out for that. But again, I hope to see you guys for the next one. As always, you guys can be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the video out. And feel free to join the Discord or follow me on Twitter. It's an easy way to keep in touch, especially if you guys have questions. See you guys for the next one, and have a good day.